So let's pull up the camera menus. So first thing we want to do is when you get your camera and start it up, it is going to ask you to set the date and time, which is crucial. We time sync all of our cameras so that as I'm shooting, they will fall together in chronological order. Currently, I do have one EOS R3 where the clock is drifting and it's going to have to be sent in to CPS for service because throughout the day it is actually drifting 30, 40 seconds ahead. So I'm going to put the card in here and then I'm going to go through my settings that we have. It's dual card slots. So it is the CF Express and an SD card. So here's my quick menu. Everything you can see is laid out in there, but let's go through the menus one at a time. We'll start right at the beginning at the red menus. And they've added a few more menus. The tabs look a little bit different. These little hashtag tabs at the top used to be numbered. Now it's just a hashtag. So your image quality, if you're using JPEG, you can ramp it up to 10, but 8 is usually really good for just a JPEG. If you're using a JPEG in camera, that is to move it quickly, but your main file is going to be RAW. So go back here, menu, and you have two card types. As I said before, you have the CF Express, which you're going to record your video to because it records data faster. And then it has the SD card slot for your second backup card slot. And I'm going to change the backup to RAW as well. And from my experience with the, oh wow, I didn't know I could do that. I can't use compact RAW on this memory card. It must not shoot fast enough because I do have the option on the CF Express to shoot RAW and compressed RAW. Oh, there we go. Now I can because the first card has to be activated. There we go. I like using compressed RAW. I really haven't noticed any degradation in quality at all because when we're in dark situations, I expose for the shadows. So if you still with Canon, which I've always done is exposed a little bit to the right, that makes sure that you have information in your shadows and your dark tones. And as you brighten those areas, you're not introducing digital noise. So it goes back to film. Shoot for the shadows and develop for the highlights. You have enough latitude in these files to do exactly that. I'm not of the mindset of underexposing and then brightening things, unlike some other schools of thought where people like to underexpose and then develop for the shadows. But from the old school zone system with film, you expose for the shadows and develop for the highlights. You have much more information to the right. After all, 0 is 0. If there's no information there and you try and brighten it and add information there, all that does is introduce digital noise. So cropping, I do like that this is a 45 megapixel image sensor, and if I choose to at any point in time, we can go to a 1.6 crop factor. While it is basically a digital zoom, you are cropping in on the file, but what you see is what you get. So it's like having a 1.6 teleconverter built in. But remember, you are now going from a 45 megapixel file probably somewhere down to 16, 18 megapixel file. And again, if you expose properly for it, it's going to be great. So let's move right along here. So tab number 2 is all of our exposure information. If I am at an event, weddings and whatnot, I will turn anti-flicker on because a lot of the lights in the ceiling are FLV bulbs and they do flicker, or they're LED bulbs and they do flicker. And as you're shooting, sometimes you'll see partially lit bulbs and partially dim bulbs. So what the camera does is it's seeing through the viewfinder and matching so that it might slow down your frame rate capture, but so that you capture the image when all of the lights are illuminated. We have external speed light control, things that I like to put in my menu. But again, external speed light control only works with Canon priority flashes and not third third-party flashes. Metering mode, currently I had it in spot metering, but for most general shooting, I like the full 5-zone evaluative. I will bounce between metering patterns from time to time. That's why it's in my quick menu. Detect priority, AE or AF while on. That means it's going to prioritize both the exposure and the autofocus. So let's go to tab 3. Picture style, I like fine detail. Usually it comes in standard, but it just gives you a little bit sharper, crisper JPEG preview. Now it is a reference point for third-party software like Adobe Lightroom as to where to begin the raw decode, but basically all these picture styles are just affecting the JPEG preview. So if you want to take the JPEG preview and lift it out of the raw file, you get a really nice JPEG preview embedded in it. Then this is where these picture styles really come into play. It also comes into play with the histogram and evaluating the scene, because you are always evaluating the JPEG preview and not the actual raw file when you're looking at the files. So I like fine detail. Color space, it comes by default sRGB. Hey, if you could shoot for more information and a larger color space, do it. We have Adobe RGB workflow, so from capture to editing, monitor calibration to printing. Even our books with Graphy Studio are printed on a wider color gamut press, and they can print the Adobe RGB color space. So I don't mess with any of the other settings because they don't apply to the things that I need, so I don't mess with anything other than what I needed to do. White balance, 99% of the time I shoot in Kelvin white balance. So Kelvin is the precise color temperature. And the way you can learn Kelvin, instead of leaving everything in auto white balance, is hover over one of the presets. And you'll see daylight is 5200, shade is 7000, cloudy is 6000, tungsten is 3200, fluorescent is 4000, flash, custom white balance, and Kelvin. So just keep in mind, the higher the Kelvin number, the warmer the image is recorded. Color tone is warmer. The lower the Kelvin, the more blue the image will record. So most of the time when we're at weddings and events, I shoot at 2900 degrees Kelvin. We put a full correct to orange gel over all of our strobes, and therefore our light matches the light in the environment, and then we don't have to worry about color shifting, meaning a bluish white foreground and an orange warm tone background. Custom white balance is for fine tuning. Occasionally I will mess with that, but you could custom white balance right off an image on a card. White balance bracket shift I will mess with to fine tune color. If you're in, let's say, the 2900 degrees Kelvin, and sometimes these FLV bulbs are still a little bit green, we can come in here and add some points of magenta and then check our live view histogram to get our color dialed in as best as possible in camera. The rest of the information I leave as neutral. Multiple exposures, focus bracketing. Again, those are things that I don't use. Now, for your drive mode, here's where it gets interesting. I was photographing wildlife, so I have it in high speed plus. So that's 30 frames per second on this camera. The interval timer is disabled. So the silent shutter mode is, if we turn that on, now the camera is completely silent, right? We could turn that off. I do like to hear a click. Shutter release without a card, by default it comes enabled, meaning you could take a picture, fire a frame without the card being in the camera. So I disable that, so I never shoot the camera without recording to the card. So it won't record or fire the shutter without having a card in it. Image stabilization, that is affected once you have a lens on the camera. So that will affect image stabilization. It's controlled by the lens, turn it on or turn it off. our quick controls. This is where we could edit the layout of this menu. So again, these are all customizable. I have everything set up the way I want it: shutter speed, aperture, ISO, mode, picture style, Kelvin, metering. If I hit my quick dial, you could see I even have white balance bracket adjust in there. If I want to quickly change my metering from evaluative to spot, I go right there, make all my changes. And these are the things that I use often. Metering is for 8 seconds. That's how long the meter stays active. Here we go. Image review, I have turned off. I don't want an image popping up on the rear LCD screen or inside the viewfinder, because that will cause a bit of blackout and it will interrupt your capture, because it's trying to show you each picture it took, and then it also uses more power. You can use blackout-free display. I haven't found a need to use that, because even with electronic shutter, it's just blinking, and without the blink, it's hard to tell if you're shooting or not, especially in silent mode. So I leave that off. Display simulation, I have an exposure so that I could see what my exposure and color values are. So here's for our HDMI and color. So I don't need to be shooting in Canon log. For video, I'm not that deep into video, I'm more still related. So shooting display information, here's where you could go into each scenario and then edit and customize what you want to see as you hit the info button and cycle through the information that is displayed in your viewfinder. All right, now let's go back here a second. Good, good. Viewfinder toggle information. This is between your screens, and again, what you want it to see. Refresh rate, I want it for smooth and to suppress low frame rate. So even if the shutter speed goes really low, I don't get that dragging the shutter look through the viewfinder. I get a nice smooth rendition on the electronic viewfinder. Viewfinder display format, I don't want a black edge around it. I want to see as much of the image as possible in my viewfinder. Reverse display is on. That's for when you flip out the window, the review screen window, it will reverse the display. Auto power off at temperature is set to standard. So there we go. Now we'll go into the AF operations. Here's where they've changed things up a bit. So we have AF operation, servo, AI focus, or one shot. Think of AI focus as a hybrid in between. The camera's going to decide, does it need one shot or does it need to be continually focusing? The autofocus is so good with mirrorless that I have not used one shot since evolving from a DSLR. The focus will focus in low, flat light, and now that this has improved autofocus, I don't have to worry about linear items and not holding focus. It has that quad pixel focus. AF area, so this is where it's going to be for vertical, horizontal. Which of those areas am I using? And I've already gone through and selected and deselected different zones. So you can see now we have 2 rows of AF area to choose from. So what this means is I'm choosing to use the precision spot, the assisted 5 points, the square, which I can move entirely around, which is more than the 9 focus points, and then the whole area AF. Now in these top row, what's happening is we have tracking enabled. That means it will track the subject outside of the focus zone. So let's say I picked an object with the precision spot AF and it locked onto the face, head, and eye, and then it started to move away from that precision spot. It will track and follow it. I do not need to actually move the focus point to keep track with the subject. However, now we have this second row which does exactly the opposite. You can see the active track icon, the circle with the 3 lines, is off. So therefore the AF area point is locked. So if I'm in a situation and I don't want it to track outside of that focus point, that's where I will use these. And I have 2 set, a precision and then the 9 point. But today I shot in whole area AF and it was phenomenal. So whole area AF servo tracking is on, right? There we go. So I know these two seem redundant, but you can turn them on and turn them off. So if we go back over here to whole area, you could see that it's off. So I like to leave this on for those top settings, so we will have the active tracking in that area. And in the locked ones, it is just going to stay locked on whatever I tell it to. Subject to detect, again, I've narrowed this down. I don't use auto, I don't photograph vehicles, so I just want people, animals, and none. Sometimes if I'm photographing objects, like let's say diamond rings for detail shots at a wedding, if I have one of the 2 parameters, people or animals, sometimes it hunt and pecks, so I'll turn that off and then it will go right to the subject, whatever I put that focus point on. So that's why I like to have the ability to go to none. Eye detection, I'm leaving it in auto, but you can prioritize. If you're doing a portrait session and someone's right eye is always toward the camera, closest eye to the camera is what you want to choose, you can prioritize that. But I'm letting it auto decide. You can register people, which this could come in handy. You could register people off of the card, you could take a photograph of a person, and you could register that face. So then as you're photographing throughout the event, it will find that face and the focus point will immediately jump to it. So it could be handy for speakers, could be handy for portraits, and it could be handy for weddings. Here's where we used to have a bunch of different cases, 4 different cases plus auto. They've now gone to case auto and case manual. I have adjusted case manual to slow down the tracking sensitivity. And what this means is it's actually slowing it down so my focus point doesn't quickly jump off of the subject. And then I have sped up the tracking for accelerating and decelerating. Again, birds in flight, kingfisher, something that moves very erratic and changing. Now, if you're dealing with something that doesn't change direction erratically, then you could just put that back to 0, or you could slow it down if you want, right? You can move this. But for birds in flight, I like it faster. Now, today I was experimenting between auto and my manual setting, and I gotta say, auto did an amazing job, and I was enjoying the results I was getting with auto. I gotta tell you, this camera is so quick to acquire. I'm gonna pull up some images here and show it to you. There were some birds flying by, geese, an eagle, an osprey. I was honed in on a gray blue heron fishing, and with my peripheral eye, my second eye, I saw an eagle flying overhead, and I just quickly picked the camera up and tried to find it, and it got it. And if you could frame it, it locked on so much faster, and you could see it go right to the eye so much quicker than the R5 or even the R3. On another outing, I'm going to take it out and record what I see through my viewfinder. But this is my first day with it and first outing. So let's go back to the camera, continue with the menus. So here's where you can customize the AF operation and how the camera is going to respond to what it sees. So I want to shoot when I want to shoot. So I have my priority to release, whether it's fully tack sharp or not. I want to start shooting, and I found that the autofocus can catch up. Versus if we change this to equal priority or to focus, if you put on focus, the camera will hesitate and not shoot until the image is completely in focus. Again, this is like cooking, so it's salt and pepper to your taste and what you want it to do. This is for one shot. You can prioritize one shot for more of a precision focus. on focus or release. So I'm going to set that to release. AF preview, I don't want an AF preview in the viewfinder. I want it to shoot when I pick up on something that's moving and capture the moments. Lens drive when possible, of course. We want it to always be tracking and driving the lens. I don't want it to stop and search. I want it to continually focus. AF assist beam is enabled. So if you have it in the, and remember, AF assist beam will only work in one shot. So should you find your camera struggling and you have a flash or the AF assist beam on the camera body, it will emit. Again, this will only work if the camera is in single shot and not AF servo. Here's where you can limit your AF areas, which I had shared with you I had done. I don't need all these other focus points. I want the spot, the expanded, flexible zone 1. Flexible zone 2 is a long horizontal. Flexible zone 3 is a long skinny vertical. And then whole area AF. In this second row, you could see the lock icon. That means that wherever you put that focus mark on, it's going to lock onto it and it's not going to follow the subject away from that focus point. You can always hit the info button if you need a little bit more information. Right? So this is the way I've got my focus set up, and I've programmed my buttons to switch between those. And I'll show you that later on here. Here's the orientation. So I have separate focus points for both vertical and horizontal. By default, they are linked. But I want, if I'm photographing something vertically, and I've set the focus at a top point priority, and then I switch to horizontal, and I let it track in the whole area AF, then I go back to vertical. Let's say the bird keeps landing on a perch. I want it to go back to where I left that focus point. Here's where you can limit your subjects to detect. I don't need auto, and I don't need vehicles, so I've turned them off. So I want the subjects that I'm primarily going to use. Here's your eye detection. I don't need it to be doing left and right eye, so we're going to turn those off. All I need is auto and off. There we go. Peaking, I like to have my peak settings on, so when I'm trying to manually focus something, I can see whether it's in focus or not. I like it on high, and red works for me, but you do have other color choice options, yellow, blue, whatever works for you in the situation you're in. Focus guide, I like to have on. Electronic manual focus, I like to have on. Now, it's in one shot. You cannot manually adjust when it is in AI servo. That's one thing that I wish it would do, because there are some times where I don't want to swap it to one shot to manually tweak it. But again, the autofocus has become so spot on and so good that I rarely have to worry about that. Register recall your AF related settings. So you could register all your settings, and you could put them in set 1. You could name these, and then you can go to those settings whenever you need to. I don't have a need for doing that. I guess if you had multiple people using your camera, you could set up your AF related settings and then boom, pick up the camera and recall your settings. Here's your AF Smart Guide that if you scan this QR code, it will take you to a website and get more in depth of your autofocus settings. Playback. There's not much I change here in playback, except for enabling playback display information. I wanted to show the histogram, right? So I want it to be the RGB value. So again, you could go through here and you could customize these, and here's where you go for, instead of default being brightness, I want the color, because I'm always tweaking to make sure my color is accurate. I'm shooting in Kelvin. So all you have to do is look at the three color values, the red, green, and blue, and if they are near equal in length, that means you have good neutral color. Now in this particular sample image, it's showing you that the red channel is going to the right and touching the right side of the histogram value. That's just telling you that there's a lot of warm tones in this picture, which you can see it looks like late afternoon light on the mountainous area. Now, if I wanted to cool that off in Kelvin, you just lower the color temperature and you could bring those three values in near equal length and you'll have nice neutral color. Again, salt and pepper to taste. Here's your different settings, all the information. And I turn things on and off. So I only have on what I want to see within my viewfinder and my review. Highlight alert, I go between enable and disable at times. What this is going to do is the highlight areas will blink if it is above 255 in value, meaning it won't print or reproduce. That means that highlight information is gone. Let's say you're photographing a bird against the sky and you want to make sure you have detail in the sky. If you enable the highlight alert and it's blinking white and just the bird is not blinking white, then you know you're going to have zero information in the sky, so you need to adjust your exposure accordingly. I don't need a playback grid, movie record time, memo auto, all the network settings. That's another tutorial in and of itself, but this is where you could connect it to your phone, to a network, to an FTP site, all that sets of things. So how to transfer it. Here are the tools. So this is something where I dive into. I record separately. So when I go into my record options, I don't do auto switch because I want to create an in-camera backup. So auto switch means it'll fill one card and then go to the next. Standard means it's just going to record to whichever card you tell it to. Multiple means it can record to both cards, and if you are tethered, then it could record also to a device or use the wireless to send it to 3 different places at one time. My movie record options are standard, so it will auto switch card for recording video. My main card is the CF Express. That's where it's going to record the largest video file, and then you get proxy files on the SD card, which would be your MP4 files. So again, that's something you need to know. Dive deeper into the manual. File numbering is continuous. You can manually reset that at any time. Clip number is continuous. File name for stills, I always customize it. So it's BBD2. This is the R5 Mark II Body 2. So when you do photograph in Adobe 1998, the first character in your custom file name becomes an underscore. So I still want to have BD in my file name. So that's why it would be underscore BD and then camera number 2. Format your card. Auto rotate by default, it's set to camera and computer, but I don't want to have to turn the camera sideways to see it, because otherwise if it's horizontally, it gives you a small, thin, vertical image. So I'd rather see the whole vertical image on the back of the LCD screen. So I do the auto rotate on computer. Add rotate information. You can enable that should you rotate it for video, for vertical video shooting. Here's where we set the clock. So your time zone, daylight savings time. So we set year, month, date, second. Usually I use EOS utility to sync all my cameras to my laptop camera time. That's the easiest way to get them all time synced to the same exact minute and second. So here's all your other information. Beep is enabled. And now you have volume control, and this is where you could go in and adjust your shutter volume. It's getting louder or softer, which is new. So it's almost silent. So I like it at default too. If you turn beep off, it's going to turn these sounds off as well. Audio monitor, so headphones or the HDMI, whichever one you want it to do. Screen brightness, all of this I leave to default. I don't need to fine tune anything, although I do add in the UI magnification. This is where if you double tap on it with 2 fingers, it magnifies in on the screen, because if I don't have my progressive glasses on and I need to read the print on the camera, I just double tap and it will zoom in, so it enables me to read it. HDMI is auto for its resolution. I want the shutter to close, so the actual image sensor is protected. When I take the lens off, the mechanical shutter closes down. Sensor cleaning, I have set to auto clean at power on and at power off. I want it shaking that sensor to keep dust off. I found that works the best, at least in my scenario. I do have power saving on right now because I only have 2 of the newer batteries. While the older Canon batteries will work, remember, it will gray out certain features and functions of the camera. So you need the new battery in order to get all of the features out of the camera. Reset the camera, create your custom shooting modes, save and load your settings, which I highly recommend. So I could save these to the card. I'm going to change the file name. A little hard to do this, not being able to touch it, so I have to go manually like this. Oop, come on. Because if I turn the touch screen on the back of the camera, it will black it out for you, so you won't be able to see it. So we could go up here, and we could do BDR. Then we got to go down to the numbers. Damn it. All right, BDR. Or if you have the touch screen, you could go right to it, but I'm driving it by the joystick. And I want it to be 5. And then we'll go back to the numbers. And we'll go to I. Guess I could use the joystick. There we go. BDR5 Mark II. And we will do camera space 2. You got to fill up all 8 characters, otherwise it will not register. So this is camera body number 2. There we go. And menu OK. Oh, passed it up again. There we go. So now that's the custom file name. OK. And it has now saved those settings to my card. I put them on my computer and I put them on Dropbox. So therefore, all my settings are everywhere I need them in case I need to register a recall. Hey Ken, thanks for popping in. Glad you're finding this of use. I know you have the R5. We helped you get that set up and dialed in. Hope you're enjoying that. Yeah, the R5 Mark II just goes to the next level. Battery info. So this is the LPE6NH. Remaining power, shutter count, performance, gives you all that information. Copyright info. Here's where you could put in your name. Copyright. I suggest to do that. So all of your files are tagged and bagged. If you want to get to the manual, here's the QR code. So you can pull it up on your phone and dive deeper into it. And then this is the new menu button, this green one, kind of olive green, not brighter green, for your custom function settings, or my menu settings, are your custom controls. And ever since I've gone to using mirrorless, I no longer use back button focus. With the digital SLR, the concept was I didn't want it to always hunt and peck because you had a fixed area of focus points and they weren't always where you wanted them to be. So you'd move the focus point and then use your back finger to focus. Well, now I just have the autofocus turn on and off by depressing the shutter button halfway, and that works for me. So I still keep AF on the shutter button. It's been working fantastic. I also have the record button, and again, you could program these buttons to anything you would like. So a lot of them I've left to default. Multifunction, that's where I can change the dial. So I push the multifunction button and I could rotate the dial to change any of my settings. Mode is still mode. AF on, this one I like a lot. So what this does is it directs the AF area selection. So by having that active, so if I pull up here, you see the AF area box, and I could actually, let's see, can we go live? Here we go. I think we could get live. Let's put the camera in a mode so we could see something. So, okay, so now you could see, second. So now you can see it tracking, that focus point is there, active. So if I hit my AF on button, now that changes it to a single focus point, right? And it stays right on the subject. I push it again, it goes to the 9. And these are the locked ones. I push it again, and now it's tracking, you see? It moves, even though I have a single focus point, once it locks on that subject, there's that a hawk, see, it's finding an animal on the screen, it'll lock on, and if I move, it stays tracking with the subject, even though this is a single focus point, right? So it's staying with the subject, tracking outside of the box. Here's my 5, the center area. Now again, the same thing, it will track outside of the center focus area to pick up a subject. But this is where I'm telling it to start. And then the entire area AF. So that's why I like to have that programmed right here so that I could cycle through my AF buttons. The asterisk is to turn on the whole area AF tracking, start and stop it. If I want to stop autofocus at any point in time, I hold the AF button, and that will stop autofocus. Let's say a bird lands, an eagle lands on a branch, and the camera is focusing, and it's through some obstructed view, and I want it to stop. So I could push and hold in the focus selection button, and it's going to stop the AF. Then you have depth of field. I've used the set button to activate and deactivate eye control. I've changed, well, this is now by default. You used to have to change it so that the joystick, multifunction joystick, will move your focus points around. Now this is the lens function button. If I push that in, it switches between one shot and servo shot. And then lastly is your flash function controls. Now remember, flash function controls will only work with a Canon flash and not third-party flashes. I've also set these up on my video side. So you can customize your ring. So shutter speed, ISO, aperture value, and my control ring is for exposure compensation. All my cameras are set up exactly the same way. I don't mess with any of these other buttons. Touch shutter, that sometimes I have active if I'm using the review screen to touch the shutter and take the photograph. Multifunction lock. This is something where when I lock the camera, I want to lock the camera. So I have locked every feature. So when I lock it, put the button from the power switch to lock, it is locked. So I don't accidentally move anything. So yeah, 1 second here. Nikki, yes, the R5 Mark II has a new battery for all the additional new functions. While the old battery will work, here, let's pull this up over here. I used both batteries today. So I'll show you. I'll go back to it and show you. So here is, come on, it's trying to focus on me. Let me get this in focus. So this battery is the original, and this is the LPE6NH from the R5. And I'll show you here the difference in a second. And this is the LPE6P. So I'll show you what's the difference. So I'm going to put the old R5 battery in, and I'm going to show you certain features. Let me pull up the camera in the menu. There we go. So I'm going to go to menu, and I'm going to jump really quickly to my menu. All right, so see, pre-capture continuous shooting is disabled. That's because the battery is not powerful enough. So watch, I'm going to switch batteries. I'm taking out the original R5 battery, which it lasted pretty good today. I shot with both batteries just to see. It wasn't that bad. The LPE6P, the newer battery, is definitely better, and I'm waiting for my battery grips to arrive. So now, once I put in that battery, the new battery, now we can turn on. So let me turn off anti-flicker. So anti-flicker off. And then pre-continuous shooting is enabled, right? So you do need the new battery for certain video functions, 8K, different frame rates, and all those sets of things. So yes, the new the original, oops, sorry, I'm trying to type here. The original, what is this? LPE6 and H will work. Certain functions are deactivated, right? The new battery, we're trying to type and talk here. All right, the new battery, pulling that out. LPE6P. Now, when you look at the back of it, there is quite a difference in the milliamps and the power output of those batteries. All right, so powered back up. And I got to say, the camera powers up so quickly now, so you can turn it on and off. My battery grips should arrive tomorrow. I ordered 2 battery grips and 8 additional batteries. So let's go back to those green menus. There you go. So customize that. Touch shutter is disabled. Multifunction lock I talked about. Touch and drag AF. I really don't need it since they have moved the joystick is now in a much better position, and ergonomically wise, my thumb falls right on it the same way it did with the, I'm going to turn this slide off back here, with the EOS R3, which has the multifunction button. And I'll put them on the graph here, show them to you together. But here, let's do that now. So we'll switch over to this camera. You're awake. Here we go. All right. So bring this bad boy down. Good, good, good. Get a little more light in here. So you can see on my hand, the old R5, I had a hard time finding the joystick. So that's why I liked with the EOS 3, it had the multifunction touch button, which the EOS R1 will have, which I was hoping would have been brought over to the R5. But it's a little bit more textured, and it moves around a lot easier. You can push in, you can move it around. So ergonomically, they've improved the camera from the original R5. Let me grab the R3. Oh, I'm actually using the R3. Yep. It's in use. That's part of my video. Here we go. Yep. All right. So that gives you an idea. All right, there's our puppy Bono. Okay, again, any questions, drop them in the feed. Happy to help out. Excited to get back out and get shooting. No to my cables. We have the puppy, and he's totally puppy. Yay. Oh, here he is. That's little Bono. Let's get little Bono in here. He's a little pain in the butt. He's our foster failure. But he spent the first 6 months of his life in a crate. But now he's thriving and doing well, and everything to him is new. So he's got the terrible twos right now. Everything in the mouth. But we love dogs. Yeah, good boy. All right. So there we go. Touch and drag, I don't need it on, but it's easily to turn on. I don't need to mess with any of these other things on here. Customized buttons for playback. You can move anything around. This camera is completely customizable. Eye control, I have active. You put it on my set button, and I have calibrated. Now here's where some more custom function setting are, and I've restricted modes. I don't need all the modes that are available to me, right? So I've decided to eliminate some of them. I don't need flexible priority, program, time value, or shutter priority. I shoot aperture priority, manual, bulb, and a custom shooting mode. I think I should have C3 instead of C1, because if memory serves me right, the quick video button is programmed to C3. Okay, that way there I don't need all those other shooting modes. Exposure values in a third, keep all that in a third. This is all good. Bracketing sequence, I've changed mine so that it makes more sense to me. It underexposes, proper exposure, then overexposes. By default, it's proper exposure under and over, but that's confusing to me. I want to see my bracketed sequence under, on, and over. So I changed that. Number of bracketed shots, 5 to 7 is really good. Use whatever works for you. Safety shift, I have all these things set to ISO. It's good. The rest of them I don't need to mess with. You can micro adjust your exposures, flash exposures. That's good. Electronic shutter, continuous shooting speed. Well, I want it in 30 frames per second, especially for birds in flight. The rest of the stuff I don't need to change at all. I like it as is. That might evolve as we keep going, but we'll see what happens. AV setting without the lens. Yes, I like to be able to set the aperture while I'm setting up my cameras before I attach any lenses to them, so that's helpful. This is a really important one for me because I do remote cameras. Retract lens on, power off. By default, this is on, and what that means is when you power the camera off, I don't need that light again. When you power the camera off, what it's going to do is it's going to rack the focus to infinity. Now, if I have this set as a remote somewhere, I turn the camera off and then power it up back on, and sometimes I manually lock the focus. Well, now the focus has been shifted, and then my remote camera pictures will be out of focus. So even though there isn't a lens to retract, I disable that. So the focus stays, if I pre-focus, put it in manual, lock the focus down. Now when I power the camera on or power the camera off, the focus stays where I want it to be. Add your IPTC information. Again, this is your caption field information. and that is available through EOS utility, and it basically can put a caption, the who, what, when, where, why, copyright, keywords, all that information on every file. Very useful and handy to have. Now my menu, all my cameras, my R3s, now I have R3s, an R8, and now two R5 Mark II. All of my menus are set up the same. So again, we check the date and time sync before every assignment. Exposure display simulation, when I'm using strobes or I'm in the studio, I turn that off so I can actually see the scene and it not be too dark when I'm using strobes or speedlights or flashes. Format the card, I do change my picture styles, I do play with white balance bracket shift. Like I said, sometimes I'm in a tungsten environment, but the bulbs really, they're not tungsten. They are FLV bulbs, but they're in the tungsten color range, or they are LED bulbs, and they're in the tungsten range, but some of them still have a green cast to it. So that's where you could go in here and fine tune it. If it's a little green, I usually find about 6 points of magenta cleans up that green. And it just makes it so much easier on the back end. Or if we are shooting and transmitting and handing off, which we do at events, to a client service provider. The other menu with the R5 Mark II, I do crop in camera if I want that extended reach. For me, it's like having a built-in 1.6 crop factor. I mentioned that before. Interval timer, you can enable it or disable it. But what I really like here, what they've done with the new camera, is before it would say this function just doesn't work and wouldn't tell you why. At least now Canon has added in here what the conflict is. Oh, so I got to go into my first menu here, turn pre-continuous shooting, so pre-shooting off. Now I can use my interval timer, right? And I do use the interval timer quite often. Silent shutter is over. Electronic shutter by default has been great. I did use electronic first curtain shutter, which I was testing out some third-party flashes. That will be a different topic. But for the wildlife, I'm going to show you some images here. Electronic shutter did great. Subject to detect, right? AF setting area. There we go. Anti-flicker is off. Eye control, speed lights, multiple exposure, screen brightness. I have screen brightness in here because there are times when I'm using the LCD screen outside on a bright day. I want it to be brighter. So I just go in here and then I raise the brightness up on the screen, right? But usually by default, I leave it there. So I haven't set up any of the video features yet, but I will get around to it. So there you go. There's the camera. There's the setup. Now we could get into the nitty-gritty of it all. So I took the R5 Mark II this morning with the new battery and the pre-capture, and I put it on the, turn this backlight off. I put it on. Did that help? It might help. Yeah. All right. I put it on the EF 600mm lens version 3 with the adapter. And I did use both the 1.4 EF extender and the 2F EF extender. And I got to say, between comparing this to the R5 original, man, it was much faster, much more accurate, and a lot stickier, meaning the way it grabs a hold of it and locks onto the focus. So let's see, can we get, here we go. We'll zoom this out. Cool. So I don't need these items here. So this is the 600 EF L series version 3. Phenomenal. I have not noticed any difference, and I have shot them side by side between the RF version and the EF version. All they really did, I believe, is added on the RF mount, and it just makes the lens a little bit longer and bigger. I'm using a Pro Media Gear foot because it's Arca Swiss and it has their standard quick release. So I can put a shoulder strap on this and I can walk around with it, and I can handhold this lens. So this is the Pro Media Gear CL2, and I could put links to all this stuff in the information. So I have the adapter control ring, so I could change my exposure here. And these are the buttons that I was speaking of before. If you depress it, that will switch between AI servo and one shot. And actually, because the body ergonomically feels a little bit bigger, it wasn't that big of a struggle to handhold the 600 without a battery grip. It did really, really well. So I'm excited by that. Have that ability in there. So let's take some questions. Ken, yep, the dogs are our babies. They're a pain in the butt, but we love them. I'll get settled in here, get into the rhythm. All right. Let's go to the desktop. So here we go. Move this so I can see what the heck I'm doing. See if anybody's got any questions. I know I'm running long here, but there's a lot to digest. So this is the first take. And again, when you're using pre-capture, you're going to shoot a lot more frames. But here was literally a grab shot. I was driving to the Kankakee River to photograph some ospreys, hopefully fishing along this dam. Saw this red-tailed hawk perch on a dead tree, and it was skittish, right? So I just, here we go, popped out the sunroof of the car. Let's get this full screen. And you could see 600 millimeter, 1250 ISO, aperture 4, wide open, 3200th of a second. So it was in auto ISO, so I had +1 1/3 because of the background was so bright. So look at this. Let's zoom this in. Come on, let it render. Still rendering. Oh, what happened? Where'd I go? I moved my finger on the mouse. There we go. Look how sharp that is. And every frame, this was a literal grab shot. Picked up the camera, popped out the sunroof, and as I was coming out, it fledged, it flew off, it flushed. Every frame in focus, and it tracked it. This is just crazy. Oh, so I've got some duplicate files in here. Just incredible. So it flew right off. So let me do this. I'm going to eliminate the dupes because I imported them twice. See if it finds any. No. So what about the raws? So so I'm using Photo Mechanic, and this will allow me to find the dupes. There we go. So it already selected all the duplicate files, and I'm going to put them in the trash. Photo Mechanic is, like Dawn likes to say, is like our Bible. It's open all day, every day, always. That's how we sort, keyword, caption, find, edit, email, you name it, we use it. The only thing Photo Mechanic does not do is edit your file. So let's go back up to the top here. And you could sync, which we have done, Photo Mechanic with Lightroom. So all of the color and star ratings match Lightroom, and therefore I could do an ingest and cull in Photo Mechanic, and then those tags will match into Lightroom. So here we go. So that's the hawk. at a distance with the 600, and I wanted to shoot at a quarter of a second and hopefully get one of the images where the heron was still. There you go. Look at that. And it locked right on his eye, and then we get motion in the water. But even when he's looking at me straight ahead, you can see, I just zoomed in. It's going to take a second to render here, that it finds the face. In the past, the R5 would not find the face when it went vertical, right? When it looked straight at me vertically. If it was turned sideways, it would find it. So it's just sticky, big improvement. Not much action here. But again, beautiful, crisp, sharp, great files. So this is with the 1.4 extender. So again, just phenomenal. Great, sharp, 1.4 extender. And it's 2500 ISO. Clean, clean, clean files. Let's go down here. Now I was using pre-capture as well, in case anything happened. So here was a flyby. Remember I mentioned that I'm watching this guy look for food. And then in my peripheral vision, there comes an immature eagle. And I literally whipped it up to the sky. It found the bird. If I can find a bird. Let me get, oh, there we go. And it has it in focus. A little underexposed because I was going for a silhouette effect of the heron, but still tack sharp, in focus. This is a grab shot, right? Before, it would have taken a second or two to locate the bird, to focus it, and oftentimes in whole area AF, if it couldn't find it right away, it would focus on the sky and the focus would rack out. But every one of these frames are in focus. Another flyby. Again, I'm photographing this guy and I have two eyes open. I was hoping he was going to get a fish. And then here comes a vulture. Boom. Spot on. Again, tack, sharp, sticky, and the ability to acquire on subject detection is hugely improved, 100% improved. So every frame is in focus as he flew by. What I'm most excited about is the heron. I'm sorry, not the heron, the kingfisher. Kingfisher has kind of been my nemesis bird. So usually what happens with the kingfisher is when I'm trying to get them, they're kind of skittish. And as soon as they are on the branch and I pick up my lens to focus on it, boom, they're gone. They've already jumped the shark, so to speak. Now where'd my photo mechanic go? Here we go. I accidentally closed it. So let's get photo mechanic back open. And I'm gonna go right down to the kingfishers. Oh, oh no. Yep, here's a black squirrel. Happen to see a black squirrel also running around. Pre-capture, fast frame rate. I mean, it just tracked this guy like nobody's business, right? Just outstanding. Around us, we have a lot of gray squirrels and red squirrels. So it was nice to see a black one. And I was hoping he would have came close. I have a ground camera set up here. And I was hoping he would have came right into the foreground to try and bury a nut or get a nut and smile at the lens, but he didn't do it. But you could try. So what happens is every time I fire my primary camera, it is firing my remote camera. So here was my remote camera setup. And this was an R5 Mark II. I had an external battery, so it was also powering the camera which has a battery in it, and the GoPro. And here's the Pocket Wizard, which I was using to remotely fire the camera. And I was using my phone to activate and deactivate the recording of the GoPro to try and get video at the same time. There's some really good ones down here of the squirrel. I mean, these are 100% in focus. The entire 2,900 frames, everything is in focus. Got a good shot here. The squirrel came out with a nut. Oh, here we go. With the nut and wanted to bury it. There we go. 600 millimeter lens. Straight 6. Boom. Amazing. In every frame. Pre-capture was awesome when I was trying to get him leaping. Pre-capture is helping out a lot. Improving my timing and tracking the face. I mean, I don't know if you've ever tried photographing squirrels, but they do not hold still. Come on, further down. A lot of junk I'll throw away from the remote camera. Here's a front shot. This is the remote camera setup. USB-C plugged into a power bank. USB-C plugged into a power bank for the GoPro. This is the Pocket Wizard Plus 4. This is the multi-accessory shoe, hot shoe, so I don't damage the electronic contacts. And I'm firing the R5 Mark II via the Pocket Wizard. So there's a lot going on there to get video and stills. I was testing it because I'm trying to get a coyote from a ground camera. All right, coming up, here we go. I got over to the backwaters of the Kankakee River. I found a deer grazing in the backwater, eating some of the lilies. It was a doe. Again, it just grabbed it, found it, focused it, boom. Zoom in on this, pull up the deer. It's being a little laggy because of my eCam that's running. There you go. Tack sharp. You do shoot a lot more frames with the electronic capture. So here is our kingfisher. And this is with the 600. No extenders. There we go. Where are we at? This is 100% zoomed in. Sharp. Sharp, sharp, sharp. So he sat there for a while, long enough for me to add a teleconverter. And then here's where the pre-capture comes in. Usually when I see them start to move and they're going to launch from their perch, I get this with the wing out and then empty branches. Well, because of pre-capture, I have every frame. Look at that. And every frame is tack sharp. Zoom in, let it render. Look at that. You could see each and every feather. It's a little rocket. And it stayed with him till he got out of the frame. Finding an egret in low flat light, no sunlight in there. Nice contrast between the dark tones and the light tones was awesome. Another grab shot of a Canada goose. Again, you hear them coming, you turn, you react. Not great, but it gets the images. It locks on, acquires focus. Here we go. This is where, now if you photograph a lot of birds, they're habitual. If they find a perch they like, they will jump off, fish, and return to their perch. So I was able to now add on a 2x extender. So we could see, is the focus going to lag by using an EF lens with an EF to RF adapter and a 2x extender. And again, it's spot on. It's holding focus, holding focus. Oh, going too fast. There we go. Let it catch up. We'll punch in, zoom in, 100% zoom. Come on, move over. So this is with the 2x extender. And usually you see a lot of fall off with the 2x extender, things not quite as sharp, but that you don't get any better than that. It's just incredible. Mirrorless is a game changer. Pre-capture, outstanding. I think he's, yep, there we go. He's squawking, getting ready to flush. And again, I'm getting all these moments and nuances and images that I've never been able to get. Look at that. The behavior. Exciting. Now, I won't use 30 frames per second at a wedding. I don't need that kind of frame rate. I don't need pre-capture. So I will tune the camera down for that. Here we go. Spreads his wings. All from the pre-capture. I have the entire sequence. I never knew that pattern was in their wings, but because of the pre-capture, I could see the full detail in the back of their wings. I can't tell you how many times I've been in Africa trying to get a lilac-breasted roller jumping off of its perch in a manner like this, and I got a lot of birds perched and then sticks because they're out of the frame so fast. And at 30 frames per second, you get all the nuances. And it stayed with it at 1200 millimeters. Just incredible. And it tracked it through the branches. It stayed with it. All right. Minimize this. And bring it back here. All right, so if you have any questions, you want to know any more, if you want to see something specific about the R5 Mark II, put it in the feed. Let me know. If you find this of value, please share it. Give a thumbs up and a like, and subscribe to us on YouTube. It's Bob and Dawn Davis at youtube.com. Thanks, and I hope you found this helpful. Have a great day.